Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing the mock opening statement in the state versus Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow Daybell. Note that Chad and Lori are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Today I will be larping as the state of Utah in the cases against Chad and Lori, assuming that they will be tried together at the same time. If not, if the cases are severed, then mock opening statements like this would need to be adjusted. And another very important caveat is that the following video is only my opinion, based on what has been released in the public record. Yet another caveat, we have not yet had the pre-trial discovery motions to know what will be allowed to come in at trial. We haven't had the discovery motion skirmishes, the evidence to be admitted and excluded, and some of you will know much more about the other murders, the other followers, the other incidents, and so on, which will not be relevant to the cases or this jurisdiction. Okay? Hearsay doctrine will also come into play and will exclude some evidence. So I'm not forgotten these incidents, but I've tried to anticipate what will be deemed irrelevant to the court. Some of the stuff I might say today will be irrelevant. A good defense attorney will be able to keep so much of this evidence out of the Utah court, so please keep in mind that I have tried to anticipate what will not be allowed in due to jurisdiction or the rules of evidence. Some of the facts that I include here may not make it in front of a jury. Okay, so are we ready? The opening statement is an overview for the jurors. Good people of this jury, first, thank you in advance for hearing this case against the defendants, Lori Noreen Vallow, also known as Lori Noreen Daybell, Chad Daybell, and the associated defendants. Note to you guys listening, we do not yet know who else remains to be charged. This case is convoluted and complicated, but we will clearly prove to you that these defendants conspired to murder and did murder the following people in this jurisdiction: Tylee Ashlyn Ryan, 16-year-old daughter of the defendant Lori Vallow; Joshua Jackson Vallow, also known as JJ, the legally adopted son of Lori Vallow; and Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's wife, of their 5 children. The defendants are facing many charges, and the judge will explain the fine points of the charges to you. First, Lori and Chad Dabell are charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the death of Tylee Ryan. Lori and Chad are charged with first-degree murder for the death of Tylee Ryan. Lori and Chad Dabell are charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the death of JJ Vallow. Lori and Chad Dabell are charged with first-degree murder for the death of JJ Vallow. Lori and Chad Dabell are charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the death of Tammy Dabell. Chad Dabell is charged with the first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Tammy Dabell. Lori Vallow is charged with grand theft related to Social Security survivor benefits over $1,000 allocated for the care of the minors, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, that were appropriated after the children were missing and ultimately found deceased. Chad Daybell is charged with insurance fraud related to a life insurance policy he had on Tammy Daybell, for which he was the beneficiary and received funds after her death. Chad Daybell is charged with insurance fraud related to another life insurance policy he had on Tammy Daybell, for which he was the beneficiary and received funds after her death. This case is complex, and we will go through the who, what, when, where, why, and hows. The who are the defendants, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. The what is conspiracy and murder and insurance fraud. Their motive was to remove their current spouses and children and to obtain their insurance money and Social Security benefits. And the how was by varied means. by gunshot, by dismemberment, by suffocation, murder. The court will define conspiracy for you as well as murder and instruct you on the law. Conspiracy can be thought of like a wheel. The center of the wheel, the hub, has the defendants and the intent, the agreement, the knowledge of the crime or crimes. The spokes are like the events coming out of the hub, the precipitating events, the overt acts like planning of unnatural deaths, texting about when a spouse will die, buying burner phones, buying or upping life insurance on the victims, murdering victims, dismembering victims, burying the victims' bodies, committing life insurance fraud, collecting Social Security benefits on deceased victims, and so on, into the outer rim of the wheel. As long as the conspirators, the defendants, have agreement, intent, formed regarding the murder or murders at the center of the wheel, and make an overt act, they don't need to be apprised or aware of the actions at each spoke. For example, one defendant could murder a victim, another defendant could dismember the victim, another could bury the victim, another could have ordered it and bought the burner phones, another could have just known of the plan and committed insurance fraud, or any variation of the above. Not every event has to be done by every co-conspirator for each defendant to be found guilty of the crime of conspiracy and the resulting murder. As long as the defendant has the requisite intent and commits an overt act, that defendant is guilty. The defendant does not have to be present for every single event. There are multiple defendants here and multiple players, and one of whom, Alexander Cox, is deceased. While we cannot legally put the dead on trial, we can produce evidence here in this court to show each defendant's part in the conspiracy and resulting murders, and we will show you that Chad Dabell, Lori, Noreen, Vallow, Daybell, and Alexander Cox all intended to murder the victims, planned to murder the victims, planned to profit from the murders, and then executed their nefarious plans, and then attempted to cover it all up. And when they couldn't, they ran. Once their crimes started coming to light, the defendants ran, which shows their consciousness of guilt. We, the state, will show you the emails, the text messages, the phone records, the body cam videos. Witnesses will come to this court and give testimony. We will show you purchase receipts, direct physical evidence from Chad Daybell's own backyard, the bodies, DNA evidence, all of it. We will show you the evidence, even the circumstantial evidence, and it will build a solid mountain. Let's talk about motive. The state does not have to prove motive to you, but we will. These defendants murdered for one of the oldest reasons in the world, sex and money, and they wrapped it all in the guise of religion. All the defendants are Mormons, but the Mormon religion is not on trial here. These defendants perverted scripture and doctrine in an attempt to twist religion to suit their base and carnal desires. On the side, you guys, this will draw an objection, but I'm going to try to flip it out. God doesn't like murder. He sure as heck doesn't like folks, wolves, slinking around in sheep's clothing, duping innocents into doing evil in God's name and then doing damage to the religion itself with their foul deeds. That would draw an objection, but I'd try to fly it anyway. Let's get back to motive. It does not matter if some of the defendants, like Chad and Lori, didn't even believe their own con. As long as all the individual parties have the necessary intent, they are guilty. Let's go over the timeline. The evidence will show that the defendant, Chad Dabell, was or is a doomsday prophet, an author of end times novels, fiction, if you will. He was married to his college sweetheart named Tammy, and they have 5 kids. Per his own books, Chad moved to Rexburg, Idaho because of a vision. He was always having visions. Meanwhile, his wife, Tammy Daybell, is the real breadwinner. She worked as a librarian while Chad was working on his books, participating in prepper events, participating in a vow, doing podcasts, and the family ends up filing bankruptcy. In October of 2018, the defendant, Chad Dabell, meets married defendant Lori Vallow. Lori Vallow had been reading his books. Chad is like a Mormon rock star to Lori, and the state will show that Chad introduced himself to Lori as having been married to her in a previous life. At this time, Lori was married to Charles Vallow and living in Chandler, Arizona with their 2 children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow. Lori also has an older child named Colby who will testify to this court. This idea, this concept between the defendants, Chad Dabell and Lori Vallow Daybell, of being married in a previous existence starts a trajectory of fantastical beliefs and deadly actions. Witnesses will testify as to their meeting, Chad's religious beliefs, Lori's religious beliefs, and the instant rapport between these married individuals. Chad was offering Lori equal priesthood power in his church of the firstborn. And the witnesses will tell you, and the emails will show, that Lori and Chad were both religious zealots. On October 26, 2018, we will show that Chad, Lori, and her brother Alex began planning their crimes. Chad and Lori endorsed and espoused religious beliefs for the purpose of encouraging and or justifying homicide. We will prove their intent and their overt acts in furtherance of their intent. By October 30th, 2018, defendant Chad Dabell emailed married Lori Vallow something called family history documents, scrutinizing the people in Lori's life, her husband, her ex-husband, her children, and rating them on a light and dark scale. Witnesses will detail what this scale meant, essentially good and evil. But instead of deleting this wacky email, Lori considered it. Instead of deleting it like a normal person, defendant Lori Vallow begins to believe it and share it. Chad Dabell emailed this to Lori. Chad introduced the concept of people being dark or evil, and he rated them. The evidence will show that defendant Chad Dabell introduced the concept of zombies. Chad was not framed. He started this whole thing. We will show that this relationship created concern for Lori's husband, Charles Vallow. The evidence will show that Charles Vallow saw his wife behaving in a way he believed was irrational, and so he reached out to her family, the Cox family, for help. We will show you the emails and the texts. On November 16th and 17th, 2018, there was a prepper event in Mesa, Arizona. Witnesses will testify that defendant Chad Dabell gave a talk and then stayed at Lori's marital home while her husband, Charles, was out of town. Witnesses will testify that this is also the time that they were sealed to each other, that's being spiritually married, in the temple while both of their spouses were alive. Let that sink in. They were having a quote-unquote spiritual conference. These 2 defendants, Lori Vallow and Chad Dabell, attempted to marry themselves in a Mormon temple while they were both married to other people. This is not bigamy. This is premeditation. They wanted to be together. And the other acquaintances or followers or members of the Church of the Firstborn, whatever you choose to call them, people like Zulema Pastenes and Melanie Gibb and Melanie Pulowski, will testify before you. Some of these followers have turned state's witness, and they will help you to understand what was going on. On January 22nd, 2019, the evidence will show that the defendant, Chad Dabell, emailed defendant Lori Vallow with the subject title, quote, "Demon with a name, Nick Schneider." Again, Chad emailed Lori about her family members, in this case her husband, essentially telling her that Charles had a demon in him. And Lori believed it. Lori goes around spouting it to all and sundry. Chad was not framed into doing this. Chad was not framed into sending this email. Do not let the defendant fool you if he attempts to say so. Why would Chad Dabell want Lori Vallow to believe her husband was evil? Why? So that she would leave Charles? So that she would have no mercy for Charles's death? Witnesses will tell you, and the evidence will show, that defendant Lori Vallow began telling everyone that her husband Charles was cheating on her, which was pure projection. It was an excuse. She was cheating, so she projected that onto Charles. By late January 2019, defendant Lori Vallow acted upon Chad's warning and took her son, JJ, and moved from Chandler, Arizona. The evidence will show, and witnesses will testify, that Lori went on a money grab and sabotaged her husband Charles while he was out of town. She canceled his return plane ticket. She moved his truck from the Phoenix airport, removed all his possessions, and hid them behind her massive food storage prepping stuff. And she used 2,000 Enterprise rental card points. She pilfered $35,000 from his business account. As a co-signer, she was able to do so, and she transferred it to a personal account, and then she transferred the money to another account. Charles could not pay his employees. Defendant Lori Vallow then told Charles that she will murder him if he stands in her way, and that she is a, quote, translated being who cannot taste death. Defendant Lori Vallow took her cues from Chad and began calling Charles Nick Schneider because Lori says Charles is possessed. Lori's mental state is being broadcast. The court will tell you you are not to consider the defendant's culpability in the murder of Charles Vallow. The murder of Charles Vallow is not an issue before you. When Chad Dabell notices the effect that that email had on Lori Vallow, he does not tell her, "No, that's not what I meant by calling your husband a demon. No, we will prove that this destruction is what they all wanted." We will put into evidence the body camera video from January 30th, 2019, where Charles Vallow goes to the police. See, when Charles arrived home in Arizona, Lori had also changed the locks and removed his belongings down to his underwear because, zombies don't need those things. The next day, January 31st, 2019, the Gilbert Police Department were notified regarding the psych hold on Lori regarding community bridges and a 72-hour observation that the court had approved. A discussion with Charles Vallow was captured on body cam. You will see Charles try valiantly to convince the police that Lori Vallow was unwell, but they simply do not take him seriously. "I can murder you with my powers," is what you will see Charles say that Lori had said. Between January and July of 2019, Charles Vallow tried to reach out to the Cox family. That's Lori's family. He tried to reach out with texts and emails, and we will put those into evidence. Adam Cox, Lori's brother, and his son, Zach Cox, communicated with Charles, and they will testify here in court. Lori told Zach Cox that Charles was figuratively dead and had a zombie inside of him. According to Zach Cox, Lori had help moving Charles's belongings from the other members. The evidence will show that Charles Vallow filed for divorce, and due to Lori's mental state, he petitioned the court for her to have a mental evaluation. This was to be performed at Community Bridges, but first she had to be served with the papers. We will put into evidence the police department videos from January 31st, 2019 that show in a preemptive strike defendant Lori Vallow, her daughter Tylee, and Melanie Gibb go to the Gilbert Police Department. You will hear defendant Lori Vallow complain that Charles took her purse when she was dropping off their son JJ at school, which is true because Charles was attempting to get the police on the scene to serve Lori. You will hear Melanie Gibb tell the police what they saw, some story about another friend, Jason Mao, who just happened to be running by, and that they asked him his advice, and taking his advice, allegedly, they decided to go to the police station. The police told Lori about Community Bridges and told her that she was free to leave the police department until the proper paperwork arrived. According to witness testimony and a police follow-up, Lori allegedly went to Community Bridges, driven by Melanie Gibb. Lori checked in and was discharged within a few hours and was picked up by 16-year-old Tylee. That day, Lori Vallow had a mental evaluation and was judged to be no threat to herself or others. The evidence will show that by February 2019, Charles Vallow was still trying to have Lori served with divorce papers, and she was avoiding service of process for 2 months. Lori ran off and visited Kauai and asked a friend, April Raymond, if she could stay with her. April Raymond will testify to you that Lori claimed Charles had been having an affair. She spoke glowingly to April about Chad Daybell's books and about their friend named Zulema who, quote, had the power to control the elements. And April will tell you that Lori tried to recruit April into the Church of the Firstborn. She also tells April that Charles was dead and has a demon living inside of him. What does April do? She distanced herself from Lori. The evidence will show that on February 4th, 2019, Charles upped the ante with his estranged wife. He went to his attorney and they filed an order of protection against Lori, and Charles told his attorney that if anything happened to him, Lori and Alex did it. In the divorce paperwork, Charles had requested sole custody of JJ, the return of the money that Lori took from the business account, and it's also noted that Lori Vallow had threatened his life. On February 6, 2019, the evidence will show that Lori texted Zulema Pastenes, telling her that Charles Vallow was, quote-unquote, blocking her gifts. There was a discussion to cause harm to Charles, who was referred to as a dark spirit, Hiplos, or Ned. Code words or code names were used for Charles Vallow. These were thought to be the demons inhabiting Charles Vallow. The evidence will show that Chad Dabell put those notions into Lori's head. Witnesses will testify that Chad Dabell is the one who invented the zombie notion. The state will show you evidence that on February 8th, 2019, someone tried to change Charles Vallow's PIN number to his $1 million life insurance policy. Someone, the defendant Lori Vallow, tried to change the PIN number and the beneficiary designation on that $1 million life insurance policy. This is an overt act in the death of Charles Vallow. Although the defendant's culpability for his death will not be an issue at this trial, Charles Vallow suspected it was his wife, Lori Noreen Vallow, who he was then divorcing. So he endeavored to change it back to his sister, Kay Woodcock. The evidence will show that Lori Vallow did not talk to her husband, Charles Vallow, or to her son, JJ, for approximately 30 days. And she was telling people that she was letting Charles take care of JJ so that he could see what she'd been dealing with for the last 7 years, as if her son, JJ, was a huge burden to her. And we submit to you that this was her state of mind regarding her beloved child. In March of 2019, we will put into evidence an email that Charles Vallow sent to his estranged wife, Lori Vallow, regarding the mistreatment of her son, JJ, when she up and left. This email goes to show her cold, calculated disregard for JJ's welfare, a beginning pattern. Finally, Charles relented. Charles Vallow dismissed the divorce against his wife, but they remained separated. Charles still loved Lori Vallow. Melanie Gibb will testify that Lori said she went back to Charles Vallow because she needed to get Charles's finances in order. That tells you all you need to know about Lori's motives. It is the money. We will put into evidence a text sent June 3rd, 2019. Lori sent regarding her husband, Charles. Reads as follows: just got home and got JJ to sleep. Let's go spiritually tonight and work on him. We give the timing to the Lord. We don't need to relent. This is war. End quote. We will present this to you to show Lori's state of mind and that they were working as a group. Let's go spiritually tonight and work on him? How else can you take that? On June 19th, 2019, a text came into Lori's phone. Reads as follows: oh, and can you meet me at the temple in the morning? I have time tomorrow and we can work on Hiplos. We've already established that Hiplos was thought to be a demon inside of Charles. And we also want to point out that the word we again, we. Conspiracy was already present before the death of Charles Vallow. In June of 2019, Charles Vallow rented a home in Chandler, Arizona for his estranged wife, Lori Vallow. This rental home will later be the location of Charles's death and the location of the event in which the children saw his death. The only reason we are presenting this information to you regarding Charles is to show what the children saw the day he was murdered. They were witnesses, and you know what happens to unwanted witnesses. And we will submit to you that Lori was beginning to panic. Adam Cox, her brother, and others will testify that Lori had been spending 8 hours a day in the temple. Charles Vallow asked her brother Adam Cox to record Lori's outrageous beliefs and give the recording to her bishop so that she would lose her temple access. Witnesses will tell you that Charles naively thought that taking a break from the temple would help make Lori better and come to her senses. Folks, this is all part of the motive. On June 21st, 2019, defendant Lori Vallow performed searches regarding Social Security. We submit to you that she was trying to assess how much money she would receive in death benefits for her family members. This is premeditation. On June 28th or 2019th of 2019, Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, discovered a fake email. The email, which we will place into evidence, purported to be from Charles to Chad, asking Chad to come to his home, stay, and help him get a book underway. But Charles was perplexed, as Charles was not writing a book or asking Chad Dabell, of all people, to stay at his home. In fact, Charles Vallow was suspicious of Chad. Charles confronted Lori regarding this email, and he told her, quote, "Come clean by the end of the day or I will tell." Charles then threatened to contact Chad Dabell's wife, Tammy, and show her some of their emails. After finding this faked email, Charles Vallow spoke to Adam Cox, Lori's older brother, noting to him that Lori and Chad were up to something. Charles wrote, quote, "I am going to send it to Chad Daybell's wife. Her name is Tammy, and I found her email address on their website. I've got her cell number too." Adam Cox will take the stand and he will tell you that he and Charles Vallow planned an intervention for Lori around July 10th, but that Lori discovered it on July 9th, perhaps through one of her family members. To foil the upcoming intervention, Lori told her family that Charles and others were trying to kill her for her insurance money. This is projection at its finest. Projection is when you're doing something and you assume others are doing it too. On July 10th, 2019, Lori reached out and convinced another one of the members to cancel a trip they had planned to Utah for a wedding, and Lori wrote, "You can't go at all. We both need to stay here and defend ourselves. It's coming to a head. This week will change everything." End quote. And I ask you, we. Who is we? On July 11th, Charles Vallow showed up in a rental car at South Four Peaks Place, that's Lori's rented home, to take JJ to school on a previously arranged visit, and he never made it out of that rental house alive. Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Alex Cox, one of Lori's brothers, in what was claimed to be self-defense. After Alex shot Charles dead with a .45 caliber pistol, Lori took off in Charles's rental car and took JJ to school, and later returned with Tylee at what was now a crime scene. And Lori told law enforcement that Alex Cox was only there because she was worried that Charles would cause trouble. Alex Cox called 911 and said that he had shot Charles in self-defense. He lied when he said he performed CPR. The judge will instruct you that in this court, the death of Charles Vallow is not an issue for you to decide. This is a limiting instruction. We present this to you because you need to understand the motive also for the later crimes. Just note that in the point of this narrative, Charles is now out of the way, and Lori's children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, were present at Charles's death. Also note that the only person still alive from that event is Lori Vallow. Note that every single person witness to Charles Vallow's murder except Lori is now dead. The cover-up is also part of the motive for Tylee and JJ's death, what they saw that fateful day. The evidence will show that Charles's death was a planned event and necessary to prevent Charles and others from confronting Lori. It also freed her up to be with Chad Dabell if he was to ever divorce his wife or something was to happen to her. But at that time that Charles was murdered, Tylee was there. And Tylee and even JJ knew the truth about Charles, and they are now liabilities. The evidence will show that Lori Vallow took off with Charles Vallow's cell phone in that rental car. At 7:49 a.m., Lori took Charles's phone and she left, according to the pings. She went to the Burger King, then to the Walgreens to purchase flip-flops for herself and Tylee. She returned to the crime scene at 8:48 a.m. Charles Vallow lay dead or dying for 43 minutes before 911 was called by Alex Cox. Lori was shopping and Alex was cleaning up. And Tylee saw it all. Enter Kay Woodcock, grandmother of JJ Vallow. Kay Woodcock was immediately concerned for the safety of JJ after Charles's death, and she was in constant communication with the authorities throughout this tragedy. Yes, you heard that correct. The police were made aware of the danger, and we will show you the emails. And here is where the crap hits the fan. On July 15th, 2019, Lori Vallow called Charles Vallow's life insurance company, and she discovered that she would not be receiving any money because she was not his listed beneficiary. Kay Woodcock is the listed beneficiary on Charles Vallow's life insurance policy. Since Lori Vallow was not the named beneficiary, she did not receive any of the $1 million. Lori had 1 million reasons to be angry, to be furious. We will show you the calls from July 15th, 2019 and July 29th, 2019. Lori is left without Charles's income, and she has 2 minor children, one of whom is autistic. Lori angrily texts to Kay Woodcock on July 29th, 2019, and Kay Woodcock then alerted the authorities to the danger she felt JJ was in. Kay Woodcock pushed for a welfare check on her grandchild, and this is what starts to break the case open. But not yet. We will put into evidence, and we will prove to you the overt act of July 18th, 2019. Lori texts Chad, quote, "So I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March, so it's probably Ned before we got rid of him. They can't tell me to who, of course, but it's done. I'll still get the $4,000 a month from Social Security," end quote. Boom. There's your motive. Ned is the code name for Charles, that demon they believed was in Charles, and she says here, before we got rid of him. This is Lori to Chad. Who is we? The defendants. What did they do? They got rid of Charles. Why? Life insurance. Life insurance, but it didn't go the way she planned. She tells Chad that she can still obtain $4,000 a month. The defendant, Chad Dabell, will probably insist that he was framed. Chad was not framed. He was not only in on the conspiracy, he was the mastermind, if you can call it that. Defendant Lori Vallow can no longer fund her lifestyle with Charles's life insurance payout because she didn't receive it. But she still received money for JJ and Tylee. See, Tylee gets money from her own father, Joe Ryan's death, which as a minor, Lori is the custodian of those funds. And we will show you that Tylee had been left some money through her recently deceased father, Joe Ryan, and Social Security survivorship benefits as well. And Tylee was the witness to the killing of her stepfather, Charles Vallow. Tylee was a liability who is worth more dead than alive to Lori and to Chad. On July 14th to July 19th, 2019, Alex Cox, brother of Lori Vallow, fresh from killing Charles Vallow, books travel from Phoenix, Arizona to the country of Colombia. And he was in Colombia from July 14th to July 19th, 3 days after the murder of Charles Vallow. Although who is responsible for the death of Charles Vallow is not an issue for you to determine, we will show you a pattern of behavior wherein the defendants will murder and run, consciousness of guilt, and the authorities begin to notice. For example, on August 8, 2019, Lori's sister-in-law sent a letter with a theory that Alex and Lori killed Charles. Again, this is presented to you to show that an incident happened, the death of Charles, and the children had seen it, and you are not to consider the defendant's culpability in Charles's death, but to look at it in the sense of motive. Meanwhile, Lori's lover, Chad Dabell, he's still married and sleeping with his wife, Tammy. And Chad's playing both sides of the field, sleeping with his wife, Tammy, and sleeping with Lori Vallow, and we're not here to judge his sexual morality or immorality. Let's talk about JJ. JJ was autistic, and they had a service dog for him and other coping and soothing items like the drugs he took to help calm him down. He had an iPad that had apps on it that helped to calm him down, to soothe him, and a service dog named Bailey. On July 22nd, 2019, Lori emailed regarding Bailey, JJ's service dog, trying to sell the dog and citing a, quote, change in life circumstances. Folks, this is premeditation. JJ had no change in life circumstance of note. He was still alive and needed his service dog to maintain mental stability. Lori, with premeditation, planning what she was going to do next, decided to try and sell the dog because she knew JJ would not be alive to need him. That is a premeditated act. She was asking $2,500 for the dog. We will introduce into evidence a series of texts from Kay Woodcock around July 27, 2019. And she's trying to get JJ to attend his father's memorial, Charles Vallow's memorial. And Lori responds to Kay in the negative. She says, quote, it's just too confusing for him right now. He won't know what's going on at the memorial. At this point, Lori knows she's not getting the life insurance money, and she's not going to give an inch to Kay Woodcock. Who doesn't allow a child to attend a parent's funeral? On July 29th, 2019, defendant Lori Vallow texted Kay Woodcock, grandmother of JJ, a photo of the change of beneficiary form showing Kay as the beneficiary. And Lori Vallow added the text, quote, 5 kids and no money, and his sister gets everything, end quote. We submit to you that Lori was raging and that she did not get that money and she was now forming other plans. This is motive and this is premeditation. On July 30th, 2019, the defendants performed an overt act. They bought additional burner phones. This is not one of the burner phones for each defendant to engage in an affair. No. Lori had 6 associated phone numbers. 6. Because you know you're preparing to do something hinky when you buy that many burner phones. This is premeditation, and it's an overt act because these phones are used to conspire in the murder of JJ, in the murder of Tylee, and then in the murder of Tammy Daybell. Lori had many burner phones, Chad had many burner phones, and Alex Cox had many burner phones. Unless you think that Chad Dabell is some kind of innocent victim, we're going to put into evidence a text message between Chad and Lori regarding the death of Tammy and JJ, quoting death percentages. Was this more of Chad's woo-woo visionary wish fulfillment or language that goes with life insurance? Chad texted, quote, I got the inspiration to go back to my original death percentages. Tammy is very close, end quote. A man is not a prophet or a visionary if he predicts the death of his spouse and then he murders that spouse. This was an overt act, and they will tell you that Chad was framed. By whom? A spirit inside of him that makes him text crazy ideas to his followers? No. Chad Daybell did it. On August 9th, 2019, defendant Lori Vallow is still trying to sell JJ's service dog for $2,500. That same day, Kay Woodcock, grandmother of JJ, emailed the police before the death of the children. Kay Woodcock emailed Detective Nathan Moffat saying how Lori was not sane and that she was worried for JJ, that Lori did not want JJ anymore back in January, and that now she doesn't have the $1 million, she really won't want him now. Before JJ's murder, Kay Woodcock was telling police about her fear that Lori would hurt JJ. Kay kept corresponding. On August 23rd, 2019, we will show you the correspondence between Kay Woodcock and law enforcement, with her giving them advice on how to crack Tylee to get to the bottom of Charles's murder. On August 10th, 2019, JJ Vallow had his last FaceTime call with Kay and Larry Woodcock, his grandparents. The defendant, Lori Vallow, at least allowed them that. On August 16th, 2019, defendant Lori Vallow changed the deposit routing on Tylee's Social Security benefits from Tylee's personal account to her own. This is another act of premeditation because Lori knew Tylee was not going to be alive to need the money or to protest to her about taking it. The defendants were going to kill Tylee, and they did so. Meanwhile, on August 30th, 2019, the dog trainer had gotten wind of Lori trying to sell Bailey, the dog, and came to pick up Bailey. The trainer will testify that Lori said, quote, "If Tylee asks about the dog, just tell her you found a home because she's really upset about this." End quote. Folks, Tylee was upset about Lori getting rid of the dog. Lori was telling everyone in her life to lie. Tylee was worried about the dog, Bailey. Do you think she's going to stand still while her little brother JJ is harmed? No. This is maybe the reason why Tylee was murdered first. On August 31st, 2019, the property manager at the rental home had requested that Lori vacate the property at the end of August after the shooting of Charles Vallow at the rental home and a pool party that she had thrown afterwards that day got back to him, and so he had asked her to vacate the premises. So Lori had to leave, but she lied, and she told people that she had to, quote, leave the place where Charles died, like it was bothering her. You will hear from Melanie Gibb, and she will tell you that both Lori and Chad expected Tammy Dabell to, quote, pass away before Lori moved to Rexburg, Idaho. But that just didn't happen. So on September 1st, 2019, the gang decamped to the Rexburg, Idaho complex. Alex Cox and Lori Vallow moved closer to Chad Dabell, and the gang will eventually all live in the same area of Idaho. Later, Melanie Pulowski will move here as well into the same complex. September 8, 2019 was a day of reckoning. While Chad Dabell and Tammy Dabell were increasing her life insurance policy to its maximum amount, which we will submit to you was premeditation, Tylee, Lori Vallow, Alex Cox, and JJ all go to Yellowstone National Park. September 8th, 2019 is the last date that Tylee Ashlyn Ryan was seen alive. Folks, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence in this case, and this is a very important piece to understand. On September the 8th, 2019, in between upping his his wife's life insurance policy, Chad Dabell is also Googling. Chad Googles south-southwest wind on Quora the day before Tylee's body is burned in his yard to determine which way the wind was blowing. This is an overt act of premeditation because Chad wanted to burn a body of someone who is not yet dead on his property and was assessing which way the wind would blow so as not to alert the neighbors with the stench. This is premeditation, and Chad Dabell was not framed. Using the FBI's CAST data analysis, we will prove to you when and where each child was buried in Chad Dabell's backyard, and by deduction, which defendants were there. But like we mentioned before, in a conspiracy, all the defendants have to agree upon is the plan, is the concept, the idea. Not every defendant had to be on the scene doing every single act to be found guilty of the murders. On September 9th, 2019, Alex Cox's cell phone was pinging at apartment 175. Then between midnight and 6 a.m., it was pinging at Chad Dabell's apartment. At that same time, Chad Dabell is on the property. Afterwards, Chad then texts his wife, Tammy, who is not on the property, a story about killing a raccoon and burning limb debris and burying it in a pet cemetery. Note that no raccoon is ever discovered on the Daybell property during the excavation of the property. This is consciousness of guilt. Consciousness of guilt is the inference that the defendant knows he's guilty of a crime because he's taken actions like creating an alibi or changing his last name or running from the scene and so on. Chad knows that someone may have heard a gunshot, that they are digging a hole on the property and then burning a body, and he has to make some kind of alibi to his wife about it, to his own wife. Tylee Ashlyn Ryan is buried on Chad's property at the place those phones were pinging, and no one had ever seen Tylee alive again. So Tylee has been murdered, and she lies buried on Chad Daybell's property. On September 14th, 2019, we will show you a picture and a 40-second video taken of J.J. Vallow at Bear World from the defendant Lori Vallow's phone. Bear World is south of Rexburg, and we will show you this picture to prove that J.J. was alive and there is no sign of Tylee. We haven't even had the opportunity to speak yet about the closeness of these two siblings, of how Tylee commonly took care of JJ, how Tylee was as much of a mother to JJ as Lori was. On September 16th, 2019, around this date, Melanie Gibb will take the stand and tell you that Lori said, quote, JJ is not part of the plan. JJ is not part of the plan. Defendants Chad Daybell and defendant Lori Vallow were going on with their normal activities, and they were doing a podcast with Melanie Gibb. JJ was still alive at this point, the date of September 16th, 2019. Tylee's not there, and defendant Lori Vallow maintains that Tylee is at BYU. Mind you, Tylee's smart, but she's 16 years old, and we're to believe that she's at BYU, but that's the alibi that Lori was telling people. And then we have the fateful weekend of JJ's death, JJ's murder. Let's call it like it is, a murder. September 19th, Melanie Gibb and then later David Warwick visited Lori Vallow at her residence until September 23rd. Melanie and David stay in Lori's apartment. Alex Cox has his apartment right by. Melanie Gibb will take the stand, and she will tell you that she saw Chad Daybell with Lori Vallow off and on that weekend, except for Monday. Melanie Gibb will tell you that Lori said on September 22nd, quote, JJ has become a zombie. And in this case, as you know, zombies are murdered. On September 22nd, 2019, at 10:46 a.m., according to the pictures metadata, there's a last known picture of Joshua J.J. Vallow taken on an Apple iPhone. You will see this heartbreaking picture, which shows JJ in his red pajamas with the Sleepy Hero lettering, playing by himself. He was just an innocent boy, not a zombie. His body will later be recovered, buried on Chad Daybell's property wearing this same outfit. Coincidentally, if you believe in coincidence, on the same day, September 22nd, 2019, defendant Chad Daybell, Melanie Gibb, David Warwick, Alex Cox, and a realtor, no Lori, they all visit a piece of land or a lot right next to Chad Daybell's property under the guise that David Warwick was thinking of buying it to build on it. And we will submit to you that it was this group's plan to frame another person for the bodies being on the property if it ever came to that. Melanie Gibb will tell you that Chad Daybell wanted to show David Warwick some land to encourage him to build upon it. They spent 1 hour there. Again, who's looking to frame whom here? That evening, the group participated in a podcast. During this event, according to Melanie Gibb, Alex Cox brought in JJ, holding him, seemingly asleep, So JJ's in the arms of Alex Cox. The podcast went from approximately 9 p.m. until midnight. And allegedly, Alex was taking care of JJ during the podcast because, once again, Tylee was murdered. Tylee would be the normal person who would take care of JJ, but she wasn't there. So who was there to watch the autistic JJ Vallow? Lori? No, think again. They left Alex to watch JJ. Of note is that Lori collected a certain amount of money from Social Security every month for JJ's care due to his autism. And we will prove to you that the defendant, Lori Vallow Daybell, continued to collect on the Social Security money after her son, quote unquote, went missing, or in reality, was murdered. We will prove that she conspired to murder her child, and then she continued to take the government money on his behalf after he was dead, adding insult to injury. An officer from the Social Security Administration will be taking the stand. We submit to you that JJ Vallow was murdered overnight. The house guests, David Warwick and Melanie Gibb, got up the next morning and they will tell you that JJ was gone and that Lori stated, quote, "He's with Alex," end quote. We will show that Alex's phone was pinging on the Daybell property again. The defense will have you believe that poor Chad has been framed and that Alex Cox slunk onto the Daybell property in broad daylight, dug a hole, buried a body, and left with no one seeing him, while Chad Daybell's phone is there pinging as well. Nope, that beggars belief. Defendant Chad Daybell was right there with Alex Cox. Defendant Chad Daybell, whose previous occupation when he did have a job was that of a gravedigger. So, Tylee's been murdered and buried. JJ has been murdered and is being buried. What is Lori Vallow doing on September 23rd, 2019? Well, we found 2 pictures on Lori Vallow's iCloud, 2 pictures of ammunition in an Idaho Falls gun store called the Gun Shop. These pictures were on Lori's iPhone or Lori's phone, taking pictures of the rifle ammunition there. Did she not know which ammunition to pick for a gun? Why was she looking to buy bullets? As of this date, Tylee's been murdered, JJ's been murdered, and both buried on the Daybell property. Did they run out of bullets? On September 24, 2019, defendant Lori Vallow messaged the babysitter, Sydney, that they had once used for JJ. And we will show you that Lori lied to Sydney about having a job and that Lori said she would no longer be needing Sydney's services for JJ and that JJ was with his grandparents. Again, this is consciousness of guilt. Lori knows she will not be needing the babysitter services because Lori knows that JJ is dead. On this same day, Lori also unenrolls JJ from his school, and she tells them that she plans to homeschool JJ. What is September 24th? What is the significance of September 24th? It is Tylee's birthday that goes uncelebrated and unremarked upon. At this point, Lori has sacrificed her 2 children to be with Chad Daybell. Chad is still living and sleeping with his wife Tammy. Mind you, the defense will claim that poor Chad has been framed. But that's not possible when you have Chad telling people like Julie Rowe, quote, "My plan cannot move forward until Tammy is dead." Words from Chad's own mouth about his own wife. Lori has sacrificed people, and now it's time for Chad to pony up. The evidence will show that on October 1st, 2019, Lori rented a 10 by 10 storage unit in Rexburg, Idaho. This storage unit will be used to facilitate crimes. This is premeditation. Why do you need a storage unit when you have an almost empty apartment and a brother nearby with an empty apartment? To hide stuff, that's why. The defendant, Chad Daybell, knew about the storage unit, and he's on video at the storage unit We will put into evidence video of him patting Lori Vallow on her backside and helping her to move evidence. After Lori's kids were murdered and buried on the property of defendant Chad Daybell, while Tammy Daybell is still alive, Tammy Daybell was the next encumbrance to be removed. Remember that Tammy was the breadwinner of the family. Chad Daybell was self-employed, and Chad's publishing company venture had not been wildly successful. They filed bankruptcy once already, but Tammy Daybell had a life insurance policy. Actually, 2 life insurance policies. And Chad had encouraged Tammy to max out her life insurance limit right before her murder. Folks, this is premeditation. Chad Daybell was texting Lori on a burner phone about death percentages pertaining to his wife. The evidence will show that the defendant, Chad Daybell, was talking about his wife's pending death. A healthy woman, a woman preparing for a marathon. And we will show you text messages between the defendants, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, talking about Tammy being, quote, in limbo and possessed by a spirit named Viola. This is all coming from Chad Daybell. Framed? No. It is premeditation using religion to justify murder. On October 2nd, 2019, the defendant, Lori Vallow, using dead Charles Vallow's credit card, bought herself a wedding ring for her union with the defendant, Chad Daybell. The evidence will show that Chad Daybell's wife was still alive. Charles Vallow was dead, and Lori Vallow used his credit card to buy wedding stuff for her and Chad. This is premeditation. This is what an overt act looks like, folks. But what Lori doesn't know, what she doesn't know is that Kay Woodcock was emailed about the purchase, and she sees the Amazon purchase in November, and she notes down the address Lori had the rings delivered. Yes, Kay Woodcock will take the stand, and she will tell you that she now had a physical address for Lori Vallow, and she wanted to see her grandson, JJ. Kay does not know that JJ is dead. On October 4th, 2019, Tammy Daybell was instructed by Chad Daybell to visit her parents in Springville, Utah. We don't know why Chad Daybell wanted Tammy out of the house. You will hear testimony that Chad Daybell said his wife Tammy might or would die in a car accident. This is the chatter of premeditation with his followers when his wife will die. Who does that? Maybe the bodies on Chad Daybell's property needed tending. We're not sure, but basically Tammy Daybell was instructed by Chad to go visit her parents. On October the 8th, Alex Cox searches for Grendel drop, quote, Grendel drop, and then goes to a gun range. Note that Grendel is a type of a rifle that just conveniently looks like a paintball gun. The Grendel drop is concerning the ballistics, and the drop is the distance from the target. These searches are overt acts of premeditation because on October 9th, 2019, there's an attempted murder on Tammy Daybell. Tammy Daybell was accosted by a man with a gun, and this man was wearing a ski mask and shot at her several times. And Tammy, being naive, assumed that the rifle was a paintball gun. She said to him, "What do you think you're doing?" She yelled at the man, and Tammy yelled for Chad, who wasn't there, and the assailant ran away. And this man, who attempted to murder her, was Lori's brother, Alex Cox. The evidence will show that Alex Cox's cell phone was pinging at the Daybell residence at this very moment. And also we will put into evidence records showing Alex Cox's searching for terms like shooting through a Dodge Dakota and searches of that kind. Where's Lori while her brother is attempting to murder Chad's wife? Well, the day before, Lori Vallow took a screenshot of her booked flight under her former married name, Lori Ryan, and the flight was from Idaho to Phoenix. And we believe that defendant Lori Vallow met up with Melanie Boudreau in Arizona, that Lori Vallow took JJ's iPad along for the trip as it connected while in Independence, Missouri. Also, this would make it look like JJ's using it. It's an alibi tactic. JJ's deceased. He's buried on Chad's property at this point, so he's not using his iPad. Seemingly, Lori Vallow is staying with Melanie Boudreau. And at this time, we can prove that Alex Cox tried to shoot Tammy Daybell. And being, quote-unquote, out of town is Lori's way of creating an alibi. But like we mentioned in a conspiracy case, a defendant does not have to be on the scene to be found guilty. Alex Cox would no doubt be found guilty of attempting to murder Tammy Daybell, but he is now deceased. It's this kind of ignorant thinking of these defendants that if one of them books a plane flight and creates what looks like an alibi, that they won't be associated with a crime. That's part of the problem here with these defendants. On October 18, 2019, the wife of the defendant Chad Dabell, Tammy Daybell, was murdered. The day before Tammy's death, one of Tammy's friends met with her because they wanted a book recommendation, and they will testify to you about how Tammy seemed off and she was upset about something. You reckon? 9 days after she was shot at by a masked man, Alex Cox, according to the defendant Chad Dabell, Tammy went to bed on October 18, 2019, allegedly coughing, or so he says, and that she's found dead the next morning, just like that, at their home in Salem, Idaho. The records will show that the same night, Alex Cox's phone was pinging from a parking lot only 2.5 miles away from the Daybell residence. Was Alex Cox kept nearby on the ready as Tammy was being murdered by Chad? Per Chad, he was the one in bed with Tammy, and his son Garth was in the house. How is Chad Daybell being framed? It's impossible. Perhaps Chad killed Tammy all by himself to make his previous predictions about her death come true. A normal person would want their 49-year-old wife autopsied to find out what the heck happened. Not Chad Daybell. Not the defendant Chad Daybell. Nothing to see here, folks. Keep moving. No autopsy was performed and the death was deemed natural causes. And you will hear on a recording that Chad Daybell later says that Tammy had been unwell and that his son Garth was at the house when Tammy died. Again, was Garth at that house? Later, when the other murders come to light and Tammy's body was exhumed and autopsied on December 12th, the evidence will show that Tammy Daybell was murdered via suffocation. Someone suffocated Tammy Daybell. Who was in the house with her? Chad Daybell. Who was in the bed with her? Chad Daybell. And at first, the authorities just took Chad's word for it. Y'all, in some states, the coroners are elected officials and not medical doctors. Tammy's death was not immediately deemed suspicious until the reasons to investigate her death became obvious and her body was exhumed and given an autopsy. And meanwhile, the defendant, Chad Daybell, collected on Tammy Daybell's life insurance policy. This is murder, and this is insurance fraud. And then, at Tammy's funeral, we will prove to you that the defendant, Chad Daybell, was using the 401 burner phone during the time of Tammy's funeral. Let that sink in. The defendant, Chad Daybell, is using a burner phone to communicate with the other defendants during his beloved wife's funeral. Chad's children may maintain that their father was framed, but what do they know? They lived in a house with 2 murdered kids in their yard. Their skills in observation are not keen. Sadly, they are also the victims of Chad Daybell. It cannot be easy to accept that your father murdered your mother. An innocent man would not lie to authorities. An innocent man would not have murdered children buried in his yard. An innocent man would not have every move regarding the murders showing consciousness of guilt, false alibis, fleeing, changing names. And on October 19th, 2019, the motive of the defendants is fulfilled. Chad Daybell collects $430,000 from Tammy's life insurance policies. There's your motive, guys. It's done. The spouses are now dead, and Chad and Lori can live off the proceeds. The children that saw the murder are now dead, and they're free to live their best life. And on October 24th, 2019, the defendant, Chad Daybell, moves out of his Salem, Idaho family home, and he allowed his children to stay in the home, but he went to live with Lori Vallow. So it's November the 3rd, 2019. JJ's dead. Tylee's dead. They're buried on Chad's property. Tammy's now dead. They hadn't done an autopsy on her. Chad and Lori no longer need to hide their relationship. From November 3rd to November 6th, they go off to Hawaii and they stay at the Kauai Beach Resort there. And they're off living their best lives using Tammy's life insurance money and the children's Social Security money to fund their vacation. On November 5th, 2019, the defendants make it official. Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow Daybell marry in a beachside ceremony in Kauai. The witnesses will tell you that when asked, Chad Daybell tells people that Lori Vallow has no minor children and that she's an empty nester. Ask yourself why on November 5th, 2019, defendant Chad Daybell would tell people that Lori had no children unless he knew the children were dead. That's consciousness of guilt. By mid-September of 2019, they return to the mainland and they take up residence at Lori's townhome. November 25th, 2019, we will show that the FBI received a tip that Charles Vallow's death was contributed to Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. The time clock is ticking as to the unraveling of these crimes. On November 25th, this is the date that the crimes begin to come to light. Kay Woodcock finally gets the requested welfare check on JJ at Lori's townhouse for the following day. The Gilbert Police Department contact the Rexburg Police Department, and the next day there's the welfare check. The Rexburg police will take the stand and tell you how they saw Alex Cox and Chad Daybell outside Lori's residence. And when they asked Alex Cox about the welfare, the whereabouts of JJ, Alex Cox lied, and he told the police that JJ was with his grandmother, Kay. But the Rexburg police knew that was a lie because Kay was the one who called in the welfare check and has been emailing them for months. The Rexburg police found Lori Vallow in her townhouse, and you'll see all of this on the body cam footage. Lori lies and tells the Rexburg PD that JJ's with Melanie Gibb, and she lied, which is consciousness of guilt. And then when they see Chad Daybell and ask him about Lori, Chad pretends he doesn't know his own wife that well, and he even acts like he doesn't have her phone number. And why would he lie? It's consciousness of guilt. Because Lori cannot produce JJ because he's dead. He's buried in Chad's backyard. And after the police leave, what do the defendants do? Both Chad and Lori separately call Melanie Gibb to try and concoct an alibi for JJ. They ask her to lie and say that JJ's with her. And they put pressure on her. And that's consciousness of guilt on their parts. On November 26, Officer Pillar contacts Melanie Gibb, and she lies to him. She tells him that JJ had been with her, but that he no longer was. Truth was that JJ was not with Melanie Gibb. He was never with Melanie Gibb. Melanie Gibb does not rectify this lie until later. Folks, you don't even have to like Melanie Gibb. Regardless, the police finally take action. The police apply for a search warrant. And after the welfare check, Lori and Alex were seen packing up a truck and heading off, fleeing. All of the defendants go on the lam. They run away. They flee. This is a hallmark of consciousness of guilt. You know you're going to get busted, so you run from the police. They're literally on the run because they know what they did, and they knew what they did was wrong. Defendants Chad Daybell, defendants Lori Vallow, they up and they fled to Hawaii. And both Chad and Lori refused to reveal the whereabouts of the children to the police or to the court. On November 27, 2019, the Rexburg Police Department helped the Arizona Police Department execute a search warrant regarding JJ's welfare and the location of JJ and to collect any DNA. The FBI was also contacted to assist the search. The FBI raided Lori's apartment at 175 and found all the clothing removed and just some remaining furniture. Melanie Pulowski's apartment 174 was also searched, as well as Alex Cox's apartment 107, and they noted that that apartment was completely empty. The authorities were concerned because they failed to find the children. During the search, the authorities found documentation regarding the storage unit, so they applied for and received a search warrant for Lori's storage unit, and when they raided that, they found the kids' stuff inside, but no children. I mean, hey, the kids are dead, so they're no longer going to need their stuff. They also pull and they acquire security footage of the defendants coming and going from the storage unit. So that's Lori Vallow, Alex Cox, and Chad Dabell. During that first search warrant, the Rexburg Police Department seized drugs in the name of JJ Vallow. And we will show you that JJ's medication that helped him to function and to sleep, he took it daily and had refills in the amount of 300. The risperidol was a tablet to be taken by mouth daily, and there were 17 tablets left in the bottle, and it had not been refilled. Again, because JJ was dead, and he no longer needed it. At this point, the defendants, Chad Dabell and Lori Vallow Daybell, are on the lam, and the other members of the Church of the Firstborn, they're pairing up and they're getting married because allegedly, according to this religion, the end times were to occur on July 2020, and the couplings were necessary to fight the zombies. How did that work out, guys? We're still here in 2021, right? On November 29th, 2019, Alex Cox married Zulema Pastenes in a Las Vegas, Nevada 3.5-minute ceremony, and the minister will testify that there were no guests and the security guard was a witness. Alex Cox also changed his last name to Pastenes, and the minister will tell you that that was a first for him, a man taking his wife's surname. Out of about 100,000 weddings he performed there in Vegas, Alex Cox was the only male to take his wife's surname. And we submit to you that that reason is quite obvious. Alex Cox was going incognito as Alex Pastenes. Consciousness of guilt and an attempt to disappear by changing his last name. So the next day, Melanie Boudreau also married Ian Pulowski in Las Vegas with Uncle Alex as a witness. On December 1st, 2019, the defendants, Chad and Lori, who are on the lam, are flying from Los Angeles to Kauai with no children, and they're bouncing around the Hawaiian Islands from Kauai to Hawaii, from rental to rental. On December 2nd and 3rd of 2019, Ian Pulowski, who is freshly married into this family, into this group, he goes to the police as a witness. And he'll tell you how he told the police that he thought that Tylee and JJ may be in serious danger and that Alex and Zulema were preparing earthquakes. The records will show that law enforcement interviewed his wife, Melanie Boudreau Pulowski, for about 5 hours. On December 8th, 2019, a very important piece of evidence was taped, and we will play it for you. Melanie Gibb, a member of the Church of the Firstborn, called and taped the defendants, Chad Dabell and Lori Vallow Daybell, and you will hear the call. And when she asks if JJ was safe, the defendant, Lori Vallow, replies coolly, "He's safe and happy." He is safe and happy. You will hear Melanie Gibb say that both Alex and Zulema told her, quote, "You don't want to know what happened to JJ," and that, quote, "he will never be found," end quote. Lori is cool as a cucumber on this call regarding her children, and she only gets mad when Melanie likens her to Cora whore. Essentially, what you will hear is Lori was not telling anyone where JJ was in order to give them plausible deniability. That's consciousness of guilt. I know it sounds like a mantra, but that is what's going on here. You have people who are guilty and trying to cover it up. The defendants, Lori and Chad, know that anyone they tell about the truth of the children will harm them and harm the defendants. Because Lori and Chad knew that the kids were dead, and Lori and Chad knew that the dead kids were buried on Chad's property. On December 10th, 2019, a Kauai resident saw Chad and Lori while they were on the lam, and they'll take the stand here and tell you how she spotted the defendants around the pool sunning themselves and behaving as if they didn't have a care in the world. And how were they funding this lifestyle? We will prove to you that they were using Tammy Daybell's life insurance money and the kids' Social Security money, because Lori didn't have a job, Chad didn't have a job, Alex did not have a job anymore. Funny how it was supposed to be the end of the world, but meanwhile, Chad and Lori are going to the pool and to the beach. So much for the end times, so much for gathering the souls for the Church of the Firstborn. It's all baloney, folks. It is all just bull, and their actions in Hawaii prove that. On December 11th, 2019, Tammy Daybell's body was exhumed for autopsy in the early morning, completed that same day, and she was reinterred. The autopsy results ruled evidence of foul play, that Tammy Daybell died via suffocation, and we will place this into evidence. Around this time, the members of the group were getting quite scared. People were asking about the location of the children. Melanie Gibb will take the stand and tell you that she told Alex Cox that she was talking to the police. And on December 12th, 2019, Alex Cox is dead. So, Alex Cox, at this point, he's been married for 2 weeks, and he begins feeling poorly. And Chad allegedly calls and gives him a quote-unquote priesthood blessing over the phone. Through phone records, we can determine that Zulema was contacted ahead of time, and she went home to find that 911 had been called by her son. Alex Cox was found unconscious in the upstairs bathroom at Zulema's Gilbert, Arizona home, and her son had found Alex and called 911 for her boyfriend. The son doesn't even know that Alex Bestenes is his stepfather, married to his mother. Alex died from what is later determined to be a bilateral pulmonary embolism. Zulema allegedly takes issue with the police searching the house, and we submit, though we cannot prove that Alex Cox took one for the team, we submit that Alex Cox was poisoned or killed himself, but we cannot prove that, and thus this charge is not put before you. On December 20th, 2019, the Rexburg Police Department post regarding the missing and endangered children, Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow, and the case made national news. Now the public, everybody's looking for the defendants, and everybody's looking for the missing children. On January 3rd of 2020, the FBI and local law enforcement serve a search warrant on Chad Daybell's Rexburg home. It is in the dead of winter and the ground was covered in snow. The authorities collect physical evidence, demonstrative evidence, 43 pieces of evidence from inside the property, electronics and the like. The authorities also collected and tested debris found on the tools from Chad's barn for DNA. Due to the snow, the authorities did not dig on the land. Some of the physical evidence that we will show you comes from this search. On January 25th, 2020, Lori Vallow was served by the Kauai Police Department regarding the Madison County, Idaho Department of Health and Welfare Protection Order. The one where she's ordered to produce the children within 5 days and she doesn't do anything. And on the next day, January 26th, the feds serve a search warrant on the Daybell's rental cars and their condo in Hawaii, and they find the children's birth certificates and a financial card for Tylee and JJ's iPad and all these things that the children would have, but they don't find the children. But Lori has the children's documents in order to do the financial transactions that she was doing. And although Tylee and JJ were dead, Lori continued to collect Social Security for them. That is fraud. That is insult to injury. And we will have a witness from the Social Security Administration to show you how she kept collecting on these children after they were deceased. The deadline for producing the children to the court comes and it goes, and the defendant, Lori Vallow, failed to appear in Idaho on the scheduled date, and she also failed to produce the children. And this is consciousness of guilt. She knows she cannot produce the children, so she doesn't do so. On January 30th, 2020, we will show you an email from Detective Duncan to FBI Carrie Cooper regarding Lori's iCloud research. See, she's taking screenshots of booking confirmations, and Lori's being careful with her texts, and she's asking the people, the followers, to call her instead of texting her, and all of this is just consciousness of guilt. She's just not wanting to leave a trail, and she's just too ignorant to realize the trail she's already left. The state had to extradite defendant Lori Vallow back to the mainland to answer for her children's welfare. And why couldn't she produce the children? Why couldn't the new husband, Chad Daybell, produce Lori's children? Because the children were deceased, one dismembered, burned, and both buried in Chad Daybell's backyard, the backyard of the Dabell family home. And the defense will ask you, and try not to be offended at their gall, they'll ask you to believe that Chad Dabell was framed. I mean, the concept is almost as ridiculous as Chad's visions, right? The FBI prepped for 1 solid week to search the Dabell property using satellite imaging, text messages, and telephone pings, which led to the priority areas that they wanted to search. So on June 9th, 2020, they performed a grid search at the previously determined cell site hits. The FBI used these cast reports to guide their search efforts of the Dabell property. And they looked at the records and the data, and they knew where to dig. The defendants, even with their premeditation of buying the burner phones and trying to be sneaky, are not that smart. They cannot outwit technology. The authorities located a fire pit as an area of potential interest. Another area was a clandestine grave in front of a dog statue in the area called the Pet Cemetery. And finally, the east side of a pond near a tree where another clandestine grave was found. So at what we call burial site number 1, at the area of the pond, they removed an area of vegetation and found stones underneath. And removing the stones, they found thin boards, and that the roots of the surrounding tree had been cut away. And under that, they found a black plastic bag tightly wrapped with the top in the shape of a human skull. And upon opening it, they saw a white plastic bag with duct tape and human hair. They found JJ wrapped in black plastic with his arms duct taped together. Seemingly, he was conscious when first attacked. At burial site number 2, the clandestine grave in front of the dog statue, they found 2 vertebrae. They retrieved some earth-moving equipment and located melted, dismembered, burned, and unburned remains, the dismembered remains of Tylee, a melted green bucket, and a partial skull. And we will introduce the demonstrative evidence seized from the scene. These are the bodies of the 2 children, and these bodies were in Chad Daybell's yard. And while the bodies are being uncovered of these innocent children, the defendant, Lori Vallow, calls Chad Daybell from jail while the search was conducted and recorded, and Chad tells Lori that the police are searching outside and tells her that the attorney should be calling her. You will hear the phone call between the defendants as the search is going down. Chad sat in his car in the driveway and he watched the search, and once the children's remains were found, he attempted to drive off and he was arrested. Consciousness of guilt. This case is about the murder of 3 human beings, loved ones, who trusted the defendants, and they violated that trust. We will show you in detail the day by day, minute by minute movement of the defendants, and you will conclude that these defendants, Lori Noreen Vallow, Chad Dabell, and heck, even the now deceased Alex Cox, though he can't be put on trial now, they premeditated, they planned, they conspired, they murdered, and then they attempted to cover up the murders of these victims. And as these murders were particularly heinous, we will be requesting the gravest punishment for these defendants. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention. And please help us to bring justice to Tylee Ashlyn Ryan, to Joshua J.J. Vallow, and to Tamara Daybell. Thank you.